Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Soccer Podcast brought to you by GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We will be covering Mbappe being left off Didier Deschamps' roster for the French November Nations League squad. We'll talk about City's loss to Sporting. We'll talk about Barcelona and whether or not they are the best team in the world. We'll recap today's European Conference League action, and please stick around for the end of the show where I'll be giving you some of my reactions to some of the top headlines going on in the soccer world. If you have a question during the show, we want to hear it. Your input is a big part of what makes the show successful. Your input is a big part of what makes the show successful, and we thrive on your energies and insights. Whether it's just a quick comment or a thoughtful question or an opinion that you just want to share, please don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. And if you want to make absolutely sure your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Use the super chat feature at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your super chat gets put on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We really rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit that super chat button, and let's keep the show as interactive and exciting as possible. And if you prefer, you can always go to the gsmcpodcast.net to tip, donate, and leave a comment or question there. We couldn't do what we do without your amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you as part of our community. We do have to start off with this interesting development with Didier Deschamps. He has left out Kylian Mbappe from the French Nations League squad for this summer, for this November international break. Not for this summer, for this November international break, and obviously create some headlines based on Mbappe's form recently, the whole situation with him not being involved with France in the last international window, and yeah, first of all, when Didier Deschamps, number one, he wasn't Didier Deschamps wasn't eager to talk too much about this. He had, almost a statement to open up after he announced his squad. And that was about it. He didn't want to go too much into it. He did say it is a one-off decision. This decision was, and the two things that he iterated, after announcing the squad, is that Kylian Mbappe, first of all, he wanted to come. He wanted to be involved, and that it has nothing to do with some of these Sweden allegations that's been going on. We know the allegations that's been going on over his time in Sweden that he had in that last international break, when he had that break where he was playing for France, and he went out to Sweden and had a little bit of a fun time, and there's some allegations that have been brought against him. It has nothing to do with that, according to what Didier Deschamps said. He also said some of the reports regarding or when he said he was asked a little more on other situation, he was just gonna say, I'm not gonna argue when I can tell you are these two things. One, that Kylian wanted to come, and two, it's not the extra sporting problem that came into play, since the presumption of innocence exists and must exist. It's a one-off choice for the gathering, and he didn't really discuss it much after. Look, it's an interesting decision. Now, obviously, this decision opens up the headlines in regards to Kylian Mbappe. It really opens up the headlines because, honestly, if you look at the performances for Real Madrid up to this point, they have not been good enough. It's one thing to not be consistent enough, not be clinical in front of goal, and just to miss too many opportunities. But it's another thing that you're not even getting involved in play, that you're barely involved in general play, and you're struggling to get on the ball. That's a whole different thing, and it's been an issue. It's been a massive issue trying to pair him alongside Vinicius and Rodrigo. Ancelotti in the last couple of games have subbed out Rodrigo, and played a front two of Mbappe and Vinicius. See if that works a little bit better. If they have more cohesion. It's looked very, very poor. It looked really poor in the loss that they suffered to AC Milan, and against it looked really poor in the loss that they suffered against AC Milan, and in the game against Barcelona, Mbappe had a record, or his own personal record, 8 offsides, and didn't really dominate the game at all. In fact, the Real Madrid is the team that got dominated in that one. So there is that aspect to it. The form is not there with Kylian Mbappe, and it's hard to say why exactly the Deschamps is making this decision. He can say one thing, but again, why? Hold on. You can say one thing, but again, it's just words. We truly do not know exactly why Deschamps left out Mbappe. We can't. If you look at some of the other players that were on the roster, these are key important players like Mike Mignon, Theo Hernandez. Players that have had that are very important for France. They're on this roster. So I don't know. I don't know why Mbappe is the one that he gets the rest in this one. It really it's really something that just opens up controversy. And I have to be honest, I forgot I had the list of the squad exactly, and my thing is not coming up. And the crazy thing is, if you look through articles regarding the French squad, nobody's actually Nobody actually says the squad. Everyone is just talking about Mbappe being left out, but nobody actually says this. What the squad is, which I'm trying to find. But yeah, as I was saying though, now I found the squad. Other important key players of this French national team are all involved. You got Camavinga, you got N'Golo Kante, who's back in the mix after not being in the international break last time around. Lucas Digne, Theo Hernandez, not Lucas Digne, actually, he's not a regular, but Theo Hernandez, Jos Kunde, Upamecano, Saliba, Konate, Mike Mignon, key important players, Ousmane Dembele, Colomwani, Olise, Marc Thuram. These are key important players for the French national team now that are in the squad, but for some reason, Mbappe is getting a rest as Didier Deschamps is trying to get us to believe. I don't know, and maybe is this some sort of discipline for the last international break of him, sitting out the last international break, whether it was his decision or not. We don't know about that either. I just don't know. And look, Mbappe's performances has not been good enough for a while now. I think since that the 2022 World Cup, where he had a magnificent World Cup, of course, I think the performance levels of Kylian Mbappe has dropped staggeringly low, and he's been a problem at PSG for a while, but a lot of people wanted to ignore that because there was other issues at PSG there with the contract of Neymar and Messi, who's just his heart was not into it at PSG, and all the issues regarding that circus of a club. Everybody wanted to ignore Mbappe's faults in that equation because, well, there was a lot of other excuses you can point out. But now you're joining a team that just won the Champions League, okay? There's really no excuses here. This is a well-oiled machine, and they've looked pretty poor this season now. If you take a Champions League winner and you add arguably one of the best players in the world, or not arguably one of the best players in the world, but arguably the best player in the world, you're expecting immediate, if not improvement, at least remaining this, similar levels as they were in that previous years. They've gotten worse so far up to this point. Mbappe's performances have been pretty poor as well. And if you're Carlo Ancelotti, you have this formula of how you won Champions League. If you have to resort back to, the lineup that you had last year with playing Vinicius and Rodrigo up together in the front two, if that's what works best, at the end of the day, that's a decision Ancelotti is gonna make. Because Ancelotti right now, you want to fit Mbappe in there, you want to make it work, but Ancelotti, he's not gonna sit there and watch this Real Madrid team suffer if he knows that the solution is going back to what they know how to do best and how they played last season. Regarding going back to this though, I don't know what angle to look at it from. I don't know, I'm thinking he just wants Kylian Mbappe to stay at Real Madrid over this break, get get some rest so he can come back firing for Real Madrid, so that his form can improve with Real Madrid. He can get a little bit more cohesion, still staying there. I know all the players will be gone, but he's still going to be at Real Madrid. He's going to come back fit and firing for the game one coming back. And maybe he's just looking out for Mbappe at Real Madrid, trying to get him back to his top level. Because if Mbappe gets back to the top level in club football, then it's gonna resonate on the international level as well. I think club form has a lot to do with how well you perform at the international level. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, what's the likelihood of that's his thinking? What is the likelihood of that's his thinking? He's saying it's a one-off and it's better to leave him out and all that, but I don't know how we can just ignore this and just say, oh, it's just a one-off, because it's just weird. It's really weird. It's really, really weird. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss Manchester City's loss to Sporting.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Before the break, we discussed Kylian Mbappe being left off Didier Deschamps' roster for the France's Nations League squad this upcoming November. We move on to discuss Manchester City. They have suffered a poor loss to Sporting, a game in which they lost convincingly, lost 4-1. Yes, 2 of the goals was penalties, but it was a game that they were deserved losers in the fact that Sporting created a lot of very good opportunities despite limited possession and having a lot less shots than Manchester City. If you look at it, City had 20 shots to Sporting 9, but shots on target was 6-6. I think the quality of chances, despite the possession that Sporting had, was absolutely brilliant. Victor Gyökeres, I do have to say, this is a player I haven't had much of my eye on, but he showed some quality in this game. He has a little bit of that pace that he can play in behind. He has that ability to finish as well. He's not necessarily a young player. He is 26 years old. 26 years old, so it's not like, if your big team's interested in signing him, you're not signing him for, crazy ridiculous amount of money, because he's not that old, he's not that young, which is honestly a negative more than a positive, more and more you think about it. But you look at the numbers this season: 5 goals in 4 games in the Champions League, 16 goals in 10 games in Liga Portugal. He has 23 goals, 23 goals this season in or 20. Let me do the math actually. 23 goals this season in 15 games. 23 goals in 15 games, 25 goal contributions in 15 games. He's been ridiculous so far. He had a nice, lovely chip as well in this game. The other 2 goals was penalties, but some of the spaces he was occupying, the runs he was making, it really allowed Sporting to play how they were playing. Now, Sporting is being managed right now by Ruben Amorim, who will not be the manager come the November international window. He will take his talents to Manchester United to see what he can do with that whole crazy situation up in Manchester. But he's a manager that has his ways, that has his 3-4-3 ways. He relies a lot on his fullbacks for width. In fact, Araujo, he got on the score sheet, making a run as a wing back. He really relies on his wing backs for that. When you're playing this 3-4-3, you're really relying on your wing back to give you width, because your front 3 are going to be a little bit more narrow. Your 2 wingers are not going to be wingers. They're almost going to be as floating 10s sitting on the edge of the box, both occupying spaces in the attacking half, a little bit underneath the striker in their respective sides. So you don't really have wingers playing that system, so you're heavily reliant on your wing backs, because if you play a back 3 and you have wingers, the problem is, if you're playing a back 3, you have wingers. When you play a back 3, you gotta take a guy out in the midfield. So if you play a back 3, you have your wing backs playing out wide, and then you have your front players playing out wide. You essentially only have 2 players in midfield, in which 99% of the time, if you only have 2 players in midfield in this day and age in football, you'll get dominated in there. So what you have, this Morita and Hulmand was the 2 players in midfield, but what they had is Trincao and Gonzalez not that far ahead of them, so they can make a little bit of a midfield forward. And even though generally they're not midfielders, they're more as floating attackers, playing centrally, but they're able to provide an outlet so they don't get dominated in there. And that's the intricacies of playing this, and that's what Manchester United is going to see. But Ruben Amorim, what he's done at Sporting Lisbon has been absolutely sensational. He's getting the best out of this team despite the sum of their parts, and that is the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest tell of a manager is if he can get players to play an elevated quality of play and an elevated level of results and performances, or most importantly results, if they don't have the quality compared to some of the teams that they're going up against, but they're still able to finish above them in league tables and beat them in elimination games in the knockout stages. And that's what he's done. Especially, you're looking at it, Sporting Lisbon, they don't necessarily have the buying power of Porto and Benfica, but right now They won last season's League Portugal with 90 points. They finished 10 points above Benfica, who finished second. This year, they're sitting in first place. They're 10 wins of 10. They scored 35 goals, only conceded 3. In the Champions League, this is a Sporting Lisbon team that's remarkably in the Champions League. If you look at it, I believe they are sitting right now on... I'm gonna pull it up actually. 10 points through their first 4 games, which is tied for, or they're actually second because of tiebreakers, but it's tied for second with Monaco, Brest, and Inter. They're doing absolutely amazing, and maybe you're looking at it from another perspective. If you're looking at it, why would Ruben Amorim leave what Sporting Lisbon has done now for a team that's sitting 14th place in the Premier League and struggling in Europa League? Actually, they got their first win today. We'll discuss that a little bit later. Why will he do that? Well, obviously, he's looking at the project of Manchester United, the quality of the players there. You can get a lot more backing as a manager of United compared to Sporting Lisbon. You have a lot more money at the wheel, essentially, and obviously there might be a contract reason there as well. And overall, the opportunity of coaching a team like Manchester United, look, of course, United are in a very vulnerable position, but they still have pull at the end of the day. They're still Manchester United, even with how low the standards of the club has been of late. But yeah, I mean, that was a really good test for Ruben Amorim. And if you're a United fan, you're watching that, you're seeing what he did to City, a City team that you have struggled with in the greater part of this decade. It gives you cautious optimism now. Now it's not going to be easy going into United mid-season and having to change up exactly how they play, the personnel. Do you have that third center back to play alongside Lisandro Martinez and Matthias de Ligt? I think Lene Yoro could be that player, but he's still out with injury, and there's no real updates on the timeline of whether when he'll be back, or at least I haven't seen any updates regarding Lene Yoro. Until then, it'll probably be Maguire. He also, something that I've read is that, sometimes he likes his center backs going into midfield to create a 3, which is, as I said, in possession. Because as I said, when you only have 2 guys in there, it's hard to control in the midfield. So it makes sense in possession if you have a center back going to midfield, just to have that third guy in midfield. Which one of those players can do that? I don't, Matthias de Ligt, could he have the capabilities? Maybe, but does he have the pace and quickness to quickly turn from a midfielder back to a center half if they lose the ball quickly? Does he have that, that pace and ability to make up that ground in that quick of a time? There's that aspect of it. I do think Matthias de Ligt can play on the ball in midfield and he'll look relatively comfortable. Speaking of, by the way, Lene Yoro update, he has returned to Manchester United first team training. I didn't see that actually. So yeah, that will be interesting to see how if he will be fit and firing for that first game with Ruben Amorim to be able to play in that game. But yeah, as far as Manchester City, look, I don't get too concerned with Manchester City just because I always think that they will figure out, and they look great so far to start off the season. But recently, last 3 games, it's not been great. Or if you even look at the last 3 games, it hasn't been relatively great. You lose to Tottenham in the EFL Cup. Look, I say last 3 games, but let's take that with a grain of salt. You're starting James McCarty, O'Reilly, Rico Lewis, who is, he's actually, to be honest, regularly involved, but definitely not the strongest team United put, or Ortega as well, that City put out there. But you did lose to Tottenham in that game, and then they suffered that loss to Bournemouth away, and then Sporting. They're a little bit easy to play through in the midfield, I have to say, Manchester City. It's a little bit easy to carve them up and to create opportunities and play through them. They have that vulnerability. And I don't want to just be lazy and say it's Rodri, because, look, they essentially haven't had Rodri this entire season. Even early season when they were playing really, really great, when they were, the ridiculous run Haaland was going on and scoring goals game in, game out, and they had that really good run to start off that season. They didn't have Rodri. Rodri played in 1.5 games so far this season. He played that Inter Milan game that they finished 0-0, and then he played a half of that following Arsenal game that finished 2-2. Other than that, Rodri, he wasn't involved in the early season. So I don't want to go too lazy in that, but they are easy to play against in midfield, and maybe long term of this season in January they need to look at a holding midfielder that can do a better job at breaking up play, because they're playing against Manchester City or against Sporting. They played a Kovacic, they played a midfield of Kovacic, Nunez, and Kovacic, Nunez, and Mateus Nunez, and Foden and Silva occupying space above them. There's not that much of a defensive bone in that midfield, and they could be easy to play against. So it'll be interesting to see how they solve these issues, but I think they will. Look, it's Manchester City at the end of the day, and you shouldn't get too concerned about Manchester City, because under Pep Guardiola, the one thing that's consistent is they always figure out any sort of early season woes that they might have. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss whether or not Barcelona is the best team in the world.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Before the break, we discussed Manchester City's loss to Sporting. We move on to discuss whether or not Barcelona is the best team in the world, because, quite frankly, they are. And okay, look, Manchester City is the best team in the world, okay, because what they have shown over the past few years now. And if we had to do a power rankings, I have to say I would put Barcelona number 1, but I can't say Barcelona right now is a better team than City or even Real Madrid, who've actually looked really poor so far this season, because, well, we need to prove it just a little bit more. This is a City and Real Madrid team that's really dominated over the past few years, and a couple months is not shouldn't to move everybody too much. We need to see a little bit of consistency. We need to see at least we need to see at least up to January or something. I think that's a good measuring stick for Barcelona, because anything can happen. But man, this is a team that's just ridiculous. The goal scoring capabilities. It has to be some sort of record. It's a historic goal scoring record that Barcelona are going through right now. I believe I was seeing a statistic. I'm trying to pull it up. So this is FC Barcelona's actually highest goal scoring start ever, with 55 goals in only 16 games. 55 goals in 16 games. That is 3.4375 goals per game, about 3.4 goals per game. A little bit, a little bit less than 3.5. A very little bit less than 3.5 ball games. A tiny bit less than 3.5 goals per game. That is a ridiculous number. 55 goals in 16 games. 55 goals in 16 games. I know we live in the modern era of football in which there's a lot more goal scoring and there's a lot more attacking play, but not 55 goals in 16 games. That's not normal. That's not normal, and not many people are talking about this too. How many games have Barcelona had this season with 7 goals, 5 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals, 4 goals, 3 goals? It's almost been consistent. It's almost consistent about them now that we expect them to, put 5 past Sevilla, put 4 past Bayern, put 4 past Real Madrid, put 5 past Belgrade, put 3 past Alaves, 5 past Young Boys, 5 past Villarreal, 7 past Valladolid. We're almost expecting this at this point. And that's the scary part of your, any other team. And the great thing about how Hansi Flick plays is, Hansi Flick, even if they're very, very open and they play a really, really high line and they press very aggressively, they're still, all of his teams, despite that very open-ended play that they go about it, they still have a good defensive bone to them. They still, don't concede many goals, and that's the difference between what we see in Barcelona and an example, Company in Bayern Munich. They're conceding quite a bit of goals, Bayern Munich have been in the Champions League and Europa League. You can't say that for Barcelona. Barcelona scored only conceded 11 goals. I believe that's tied for the third best defense in La Liga. I believe so. Third best defense in La Liga, that's tied for. They're tied with Real Madrid actually for the third best defense. But the only difference between them and Real Madrid is they've both conceded 11 goals, but Barcelona scored 40 while Madrid has scored 21. They've almost doubled what Real Madrid has scored. Now, obviously, Barcelona has played 12 games, and Real Madrid has only played 11, so that does have an impact to that. But again, they played an extra game and they still only conceded the same amount of goals as Real Madrid. So that's also, different ways you can look at that. How high they are. Barcelona, this is a relatively new style of play. They're not relatively this open in the past. They have tiki-taka, of course, and they have, they pick their chosen moments to suffocate teams and press. But a lot of how they dominate games and create their chances is through tiki-taka, possession-oriented football, and that's how they create their opportunities, essentially passing the ball in the back of the net. With how they're playing right now, it's a lot more vertical, it's a lot more direct, there's a lot more balls in behind, it's a lot more, it's just much more direct, and it's much more reliant on the pace to win, on the press to win the ball back and to create opportunities by winning the ball in dangerous areas. And then when you're on the ball, there's no wasting time. Play that ball in behind. Try to get Rafinha running in behind. Try to get Robert Lewandowski to, drop down, link up, and get that ball eventually in behind to one of the wingers to, show off their dynamism and their ability to go at defenders. And it's been a very, very fun thing to watch, because Barcelona right now, they're playing some excellent football and they're an enjoyable team. If you're neutral watching it, you will enjoy. If you love football, you'll enjoy watching this Barcelona team. This Barcelona team plays roulette football. It's a very beautiful way in how they go about it. And Hansi Flick, he's just a successful manager, man. What he did at Bayern Munich, obviously it was a failure at Germany. There's no sugarcoating that. But sometimes managers are just built for the club stage. They just need that day in, day out with the team to implement their system. And it seems like Hansi Flick, him and international management just didn't fit well together. Maybe that day in, day out, not having that, didn't allow him to implement his aggressive nature that he has as a club, as a manager naturally. And there's a lot that Barcelona. The scary thing about Barcelona as well is this is a team that shouldn't be doing what they're doing up to this point this season. With the injuries that they have suffered, losing. They lost a La Masia holding midfielder. I forgot its name, but he thought he was going to be the answer in replacing Sergio Aguero or Sergio Busquets. He gets injured, and now up comes Marc Casado, who's their third option in that position from La Masia, and he's been holding it down. And it's just ridiculous. You look at some of the injuries that they've suffered. Also, Ter Stegen being out as well for the season as well. And the fact that it's always a transition having a new manager. We thought next year was really the year that they should start challenging again. But this year, they're looking like a team that's already ready to challenge. And it's so impressive. It's so impressive what Hansi Flick has done, trusting the La Masia players as Joan Laporta, loves him, loves the fact that he does. He said it actually in one of those webinars that he does. The fact that he trusts La Masia, I thought, maybe it would be a little bit hesitant to play how he would play entering because he wanted to ease it into this team. But the way that they've come high-flying right away, some of the resurgence of players under him, you look at the resurgence of players like Rafinha, Robert Lewandowski under Hansi Flick. Yeah, right now, if I had to do a power ranking, they would absolutely be number one in the football world. There's no arguing that they have the best form. They're number one in the Champions League. They're having a really, really good run they're number one in the La Liga. 9 points clear of Real Madrid, obviously. Real Madrid have Real Madrid have a game in hand to be able to catch up to Barcelona. But 9 points already is really, really good. They've had a really good start as well in the Champions League. After that opening day disappointing loss to Monaco, I think they've been absolutely special, Barcelona, and absolutely I'd put them number one in my power rankings. Show breaker coming up. When we come back, we'll do a recap of today's Europa and Conference League action.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Before the break, we discussed whether or not Barcelona is the best team in the world. We move on to discuss today's Europa and Conference League action. Just do a recap. There was a lot of action in the Europa and Conference League. I'd be arguing if I watched every single game. Honestly, no, I did not. I tuned in a little bit to the United game and I had the Chelsea game on the the main screen. But I'm still going to be able to recap a lot of these editions and games, and we'll discuss a little bit more of the standings. So, Eintracht Frank, or no, yeah, and okay, so Spurs, Tottenham, Tottenham Hotspur, they suffered a loss today, taking on Galatasaray. Osimhen got 2 goals in this one. He had a first half brace, as they lost 3-2. Galatasaray, they that atmosphere got to Tottenham, and they dominated the game. 28 shots to 5, 10 shots on target to 3, 54% of the possession. You look at Tottenham. Tottenham did play a B team with Archie Gray playing at left back, Ben Davies, Dragusin, Bergval, Lancashire, Brennan Johnson's son, Madison. There was some first teamers involved, Pedro Porro, but overall, it was a second team for Tottenham, and they got outplayed. They did. Good thing is, in that second half, Solanke got on the score sheet again for Tottenham. He's starting to develop some consistency and some form for Tottenham, which is important going forward. But obviously, not the worst loss for Tottenham. They had 9 points from the first 3 games, so they can, they can afford a little bit of slip up. But you don't want to slip up too much in which you're playing unnecessary games in January to get into the round of 16. So there's that as well to it. Olympiacos 1-1 draw over a 1-1 draw with Rangers. It was Ayub El Kabi that gave the previous season's Conference League winners a 56-minute lead. It was a really good goal for Olympiacos as well. But it was Kyriel Dessers who equalized shortly after, literally 6 minutes later, and it led to a 1-1 draw. For Rangers, that puts them up to 7 points. Olympiacos as well, they're back-to-back in this league table. So that is that in the Europa League between them two. United, massive game for them in this Europa League campaign, because they haven't won a game so far. They were sitting on 2 points from the first 2 games, or three points from the first 3 games. And to get this victory, they put themselves now in 6 points. Now they're in the midst of that playoff position to get into the knockout stages. They're right in the middle of that. They put themselves also in a position that they can make a late Europa League push once they get in Ruben Amorim in to get into that top 8, so they don't have to play that unnecessary playoff in January per se. But yeah, it was Amad Diallo who got that double that clinched, United's first Europa League victory. And look, I can't put into words. This is a massive game for Manchester United. Huge game, because look, you're looking at it for Ruben Amorim. If you're being objective right now, the most objective way of looking at it, you're more likely than not, your biggest opportunity to play in Champions League football is winning the Europa League. Right now, United sit in 13th place with 12 points. They're already 6 points off. Now you think about it, 6 points is not that far from Chelsea, actually. So, but again, do we really think this Manchester United team can, even with Ruben Amorim coming in, can they have that sort of consistency to finish above, either Aston Villa, Chelsea, Tottenham, Nottingham Forest? They're sitting in 3rd, but I don't think they'll remain there, for the duration of the season. I think they're having a great start, and they'll be up in that top 10 range, just based on the start that they've had. 19 points from the first 10. It's ridiculous. But they're not going to be in that top 5, 6. No chance. And can United catch, essentially United will have to finish above, either Villa, Chelsea, Tottenham. They've looked poor this season for a reason, So I don't know. There's also Newcastle above them, that I believe Newcastle will start to get it together. We know Brighton can be a tricky team. Your best opportunity to get into that Champions League might be that Europa League. So you can't waste an opportunity of being in the Europa League. So massive victory for them. And, if they were to drop points again in this one, man, it would have been a really hard, really rough last couple of games for Amorim to try to save this United team in the Europa League. Now with this win, suddenly they look like a team that could battle for one of those positions to get automatically into the round of 16. So there's that. Conference League action. Betis got a 2-1 win over Celje. Juanmi, he scored in the final moments, literally a last kick of the game goal, as Betis got a very, 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 very tight victory over Celje at the Estadio Benito Villamarin. Important win for Real Betis in that one. Apoel got a 2-1 win over Fiorentina. It's 2 first half goals from Anastasios Danis and David Abagna that was able to propel APOL to their first ever victory in the Conference League. And this is actually Fiorentina's first to drop points of this league phase. So really good win for APOL. Chelsea get 8 goals, and they actually, it's devastating, this Chelsea team, the depth of this team. They scored 6 in the first 30 minutes of the game. 6 goals in the first 30 minutes of the game, and honestly, it could have been more. João Felix missed almost a sitter very early on to the game. You look at the statistics, 31 shots for Chelsea to 15 for Noah, 18 shots on target to 7. It was all Chelsea. And this is an entire second team. You're looking at it. None of these players are players that started in the game that Chelsea played this weekend in the Premier League when they took on United. A lot of these players are second team guys, that are trying to break into it. Enzo Fernandez, he's trying to break back into it after he got replaced by Caicedo in Lafayette's partnership. Mudryk, he has not really been at that level since he's come to Chelsea. He's trying to fight his way back. João Felix and Kunku is a player that's really trying to fight his way into that team. So yeah, great win for Chelsea, great victory for them, and yeah, it's expected. I mean, the Conference League is Chelsea and 31 other mid-table teams from around the world. So there's really no expectation for Chelsea other than to not win it. Their biggest challenger is probably Fiorentina. Like, let's be for real. So Chelsea is a team that they need to wrap this up, and it's good because they can they essentially have like an extra EFL Cup game every Thursday, so they don't really have to play their main guys, so they can keep them for the Premier League, which is obviously we know how important this Premier League campaign is for this Chelsea team right now. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we'll react to some of the top headlines going on in the soccer world. Before the break, we discussed today's Europa and Conference League action. We move on to react to some of the top headlines going on in the soccer world, and we have to start off with Andres Guadrado. He retired from international football the last international break with that last game, that cameo he had against the U.S. But it seems like he's calling it quits in terms of football in general. It's very likely that he will be retiring from Lyon. This Sunday it will be his last game. And Andres Guadrado, he announced that he will retire from professional football, and it's likely that his last game will be that Liga MX game, because Lyon are fringe playoff contenders, and obviously if they make the playoffs he'll still be involved, but chances are not that they're probably gonna miss the playoffs, in which that will be his last game. Andres Cuadrado said, "I wanted to make public my decision to leave soccer at the end of the season and to stop being a professional player after 19 years. I want to thank club president Jesus Martinez, who gave me the opportunity to retire in Mexico. I know that things didn't turn out the way we wanted, but I'm proud to belong to the institution. We are still with a slight hope of playing in the play-in. Let's hope it happens, but if it doesn't, Sunday will be my last game as a professional. I leave grateful and very proud of everything I was able to achieve, of having fulfilled my dream. I want to thank Atlas that developed me, that gave me the opportunity to play soccer, and to each of the teams I belonged to Deportivo de la Corona, to Valencia, to Bayer Leverkusen, to PSV, to Betis." Cuadrado, he really, he's a staple of my childhood, Obviously, I'm a big football fan. I'm a big international football fan, and I was a big U.S. men's national team fan. But, when you talked about our rivals, when you thought about Mexico, I thought of Andres Guadrado, Chicharito, Hector Herrera, Miguel Layun, some of these key faces, and it seems like he's the last to go out of all of them, the last to retire of all of them, and he's been involved for a very, very long time. Actually, Nemo Ochoa he's still here. So actually, let's recorrect that. Obviously, Nemo Ochoa as well. And, Cuadrado, the quality he has in midfield, not the most athletic, but technically a really gifted player, able to control possession, had a wicked ball on him, took set pieces. He was really a leader of this Mexican national team. You go back, and specifically that, that Copa America in 2016, that Gold Cup in 2019. No, not 2019. In 2017, I believe, or 2015, something like that. That period, from 2015 to 2018, Andres Guadrado was a huge part of that Mexican national team. He was almost their talisman. He was their talisman, actually. He was their talisman. There was that specific Gold Cup, and he was the main guy. I'm pretty sure it might have been the 2015 Gold Cup. I think it was the 2015 Gold Cup. It was the 2015 Gold Cup, because then they had that playoff against the U.S. men's national team to get into that Confederations Cup in 2017. And yeah, Cuadrado is just a huge part of the culture of Mexican football. A very important player, and he's a player that that Mexico has missed for a while now, because yes, Cuadrado, he has been involved over the past few years, but not really the same player. They've missed that sort of quality in midfield. So yeah, obviously it's sad to see him retire, and we hope him success afterwards. Alvaro Morata, he has been hospitalized after a collision in training. He suffered a head injury during the AC Milan training session on Thursday. The team announced it. He will remain in the hospital overnight under observation, and he's not going to be able to be available for the Cagliari clash. it said that the club announced that he has suffered serious cranial trauma. He had to be rushed to the hospital, but thankfully the MRI returned negative. In Morata, he's starting to feel better, but he's still going to be under observation to comply with protocol for other situations where this, similar case like this. So, yeah. Real Madrid, they eye some January deals, and they still are, and they're still steadfast on their pursuit of getting Trent Alexander-Arnold when he becomes available as a free agent. They still retain the interest in him, but there's also sources that say that they want to look at options in January because look, they have issues in this team, specifically at right back. Lucas Vasquez is not a right back, and he has had some of his struggles, and they need to solve that Dani Carvajal issue. They need something for this season, and it's just something they have to address, and they have to address quickly. With the departure of Nacho Fernandez, they don't have that player that can play in multiple different positions. They give you flexibility when guys are out. So, I think with Trent Alexander coming in this season, I think Dani Carvajal will transition into that Nacho Fernandez player almost. But until then, they need someone right now. David Alaba, he's been out he's about to be a year now. And there's not much optimism regarding when he'll recover. It's been reported that the timetable has actually been extended, and that the issue is persistent, the cartilage issue. So, yeah, definitely Real Madrid have issues that they have to address there. Maccabi Tel Aviv fans during their Europa League tie against Ajax there was some clashes with some apparent pro-Palestinian supporters before and after the game between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Ajax. The clashes reportedly erupted. There has been despite there being a ban on pro-Palestinian demonstration that was imposed by Amsterdam's mayor Frank Helsema, who feared what would happen with the game going against the Israeli club. And there's actually, because of the details of this incident not really being clear, there's also been reports coming from the Israeli media that Prime Minister Netanyahu actually called the his Dutch counterparts about the situation, and there was actually no immediate reports of arrest or injuries from the clashes outside the Johan Cruyff Arena, but there was definitely some tension between the two fan bases, and had nothing to do with the teams that they were rooting for. It had a lot to do with the Palestine-Israel situation. So hopefully everything gets cleared there. So this doesn't really happen again. Because we never want to see violence. This is football at the end of the day. Keep the everything else outside, and let's just play football. And you want to argue amongst the football, yes, but let's not get violent, especially when it has nothing to do with football. Van Nistelrooy, he reiterated that he would like to stay at Manchester United, but he hasn't really heard back yet. He doesn't know exactly, and he's taking it day by time. He said that before today's win over in the Europa League. Other than that, we have really no headlines. Thank you guys for tuning in to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. So thank you once again, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to